So give it another couple of minutes. I still see others joining. It's a snowy morning here in Ontario.
Very cool. It's going to be that time of year.
Yeah, got a few inches here. My friend up in Scarborough has very little, so that's the difference. Okay, well, let's get this on the road. Okay, I want to thank everyone for from here in snowy Ontario, and what we're going to do is we waited a few minutes, and I don't think we're going to have any more people join us. This first session will be a demonstration of TermWorks, and this came back from some tooling feedback that was consistent from the jurisdiction vendors and clinicians when we went out and did the strategy governance review. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Jessica Bota from Apelon. She will walk us through TermWorks this week and TermManager next week. And Jessica has agreed to answer questions throughout the session, so you can unmute yourself. And I think this will make it more helpful and more useful to you. So now I'm going to pass it on to Jessica and make you the host, okay?
Sounds great. While I'm getting set up with the screen sharing, just a quick introduction. As Neil said, my name is Jessica Bota. I'm the Manager of Content and Product Services at Apelon. I've been with Apelon for over 7 years now, working very closely with TermWorks and TermManager, including the development cycle, the release cycles, and including using the tools for my own projects as well. So I'm very familiar with the tools, and I'm looking forward to sharing them with you today. I do see a lot of familiar names, so my guess is many of you have had experience with the tools, and maybe you'll see some things today that you have additional questions on. So TermWorks is our Excel-based mapping tool. So everything is done within a familiar Excel spreadsheet format. And we're lucky enough to have some sample data from the BC group. They are actually working on mapping ICD-9 to ICD-10-CA, and then even further mapping ICD-10-CA to SNOMED-CA. Today, I just want to focus on mapping ICD-9 to 10, just so we have a focused use case. But it's helpful to see a real project that's going on and how the use of this tool might either expedite the process, improve the process, and so on. So I will point out within this data, we'll be working with columns H and I, the ICD-9 code and term. And what we have on the left is the BC group's targets that they found through their mapping process. So the ICD-10-CA code and term as well. And so we'll be mapping to ICD-10 as well, and we can kind of eyeball and see where things may differ. The one thing to note is that BC has done a lot of one-to-many mapping, so we will see multiple rows like this. That has to do with having these terms mapped to multiple terms in SNOMED. So if you do have any questions about the data, that's feel free to ask, and that's likely why it's displayed that way. Okay, so as I mentioned, Excel, TermWorks is an Excel-based add-in. So to activate the add-in, you can click on the Add-ins tab once you have it installed, and you can activate TermWorks. And that's going to initiate a content license agreement, and you just need to scroll through each time you start the program and agree and click yes. And the first thing that you always want to do, well, first things first, and we'll talk about this in the third session, which is going to be best practices for mapping, is make sure that you're starting with clean data, expanding acronyms, fixing typos and things like that, because that will really help the tool narrow down the results appropriately. In this case, we're working with mapping a standard to a standard. Obviously the data is very clean and we don't have to do any of that here. So after we've checked the data, we want to, from this dropdown, configure the search options. And so we want to pick the terminology that we want to map our source terms to. So we're mapping ICD 9 to 10. So I click the 10CA from the dropdown. And we also have this detail button in case you need a little bit more information. So now you can tell that it's version 2020. You can tell that it has a hierarchy. You can view the license, the number of concepts, and so on, just to kind of verify that you are mapping against the correct target. Category allows you to map to a subset of codes within the data source that's selected. We'll talk about how to configure and use that a little bit later on. Contained concept search breaks down each search into word tokens. We'll also view that later. Score cutoff. When score cutoff is 0, it returns the best result no matter what. Sometimes that result might not be great, so I generally stick with 80 as the score cutoff, just kind of eliminate some of the noise. And then lastly, the target column. When you're mapping, where do you want the data to go? And so I would like it to go right next to my ICD 9 term. And once you've configured those options, you can go ahead and apply. So you are able to map 2 different ways, manually or automatically. Automatically will go ahead and pick that first best option, and manual will allow you to view all options and make that decision for yourself. I'm going to just show really quick what it looks like to map. Automatically, we'll just map 10. So again, I'll mention there's the Apelon TermWorks dropdown, and you can also always go from the top left here. So you can go ahead and click search. And if you want it to go through all of them and fill out the best option, you can click autocomplete and go ahead and search. And at the bottom here, it'll let us know it's searching 9 terms. It will give a percentage. So if you're doing a whole file, it'll tell you, you're 50% through 1,000 terms and so on. So you have an idea of how long it's going to take to complete. So now we can see that we filled out 6 columns here. So in the first column, we have the code that it was mapped to. In the second column, we have the name of the index. You'll see also in the last column is the name of the terminology itself. These are generally the same. Where it can differ is if you're using a certain version. It depends how you have your system set up, so don't worry about that too much. You have the term name in column N. You have whether or not the term is active or inactive. And you also have the method that the mapping was done in. So in this instance, we chose to autocomplete. And that's basically providing a visual to say, the computer went ahead and picked the best match. You should probably review it. So the best way to review it is to double click, and it will bring up the results. So in this case, it's pretty sure that this is the right result. And if you want to confirm it on your end, you can always click match. And what that did was changed it from autocomplete to complete. So that's kind of a good visualization that that mapping has gotten a review and it's gotten a final okay on your end. Similarly, if in the next case, we find that for some reason we don't like this match, we don't want to assign any match to this, we can go ahead and click no match. And what that's going to do is just remove it and add the no match in color red. And then another case you can have is it picked the best match, but you might want to add other matches as well. So you can control click, maybe select 3, and go ahead and match. And that's going to fill out additional rows so you can map one to many. And anytime you do it again by hand, it's going to set it to that green complete to let us know it's in that final state. So this is the most basic of searching. And before I go on a little bit to manual searching, I'll just pause and see if you have any questions about this.
There was one question, Jessica. Which is
Okay, I can't see the chat. Let me see. I clicked the chat and I don't see it come up anywhere. So if you have it handy, please let me know.
Sure.
Oh, wait,
I can
here we
read it
go.
out to you. The question was, can you set the source to the target?
So you set the source to the target. So let me go back to the configuration. That's exactly right. So when it says data source, you're selecting the target. So generally, TermWorks is used for mapping local standards, local terminologies to standard terminologies. And so that's kind of why we say data source, even though it does seem a little bit confusing in this case. But you're absolutely right. Our source is really ICD-9 and our target is ICD-10. But correct, you would use the target as the source. Okay, jumping forward a little bit, manual searching. So again, if you want to manual search, you just uncheck this autocomplete box and click search. And what that's going to do is every time you search, it's going to bring up the list of results. These are some really good results, so we're not getting a big list. I can try and find some with a little bit more variety. And you can go through one by one. Let's see if this is a little bit better. Things with longer names. Okay, so we have a couple of options, and kicking off the search, and I'll show you, you can also search manually within many rows. And what that's going to do is return the results so that they're available to you. So if I do that, it's going to say needs review. It's not going to fill in any of them because we've specified we'd like to do this manually. And then you can go through without having to click search each time and go ahead and match, and then move on to the next one, and so on. So where it gets, when you have multiple results and you're not sure which is the best, there are a few options here that we can use to help us. We do have the option to sort alphabetically if you know kind of what you're looking for and you want to eyeball it in the list. You can also look at the details of a code if you select it and click detail. And what that's going to show you is the code, the ID, the namespace, any synonyms. And synonyms are really important in TermWorks because each time TermWorks goes out and searches for a code that matches, it's going to check all of these synonyms, which is really nice, especially if you have French terms and you might be mapping French to English, but you have these synonyms that you can rely on as well, which is really great. And properties and parents as well. And even further from there, you might want to look at the hierarchy if maybe you think that your match is too granular or too broad, and you can kind of work up the tree that way by double clicking. So I can move all the way up to an intestinal infectious disease, all the way to the top of the tree and so on, which if you're familiar with the terminology can help a lot. If you're not exactly sure what you're looking for, but you're working from kind of narrow to broad or broad to narrow. Just checking my list to see what's next. Okay, advanced searches and search string operators. So let's see on this one. I wanted one with the word other. I thought it was in line 29. Okay, this will do. So sometimes you have extra information, or you may know more information that can help narrow down the search. And you can use our search functionality options and expressions to kind of narrow down that search. So by default, when you search, it populates the entire name and it's going to search against all those terms. And there's sometimes extra words in here like unspecified, and that may be important to you in your use case, or maybe it's just causing problems. You're not able to map as efficiently because you're not mapping to a code set that uses unspecified very frequently. So what you can do is use our search string operators. So I may say, I don't want to return any results that have unspecified in the name. And how we do that is the $ and minus. So when we search, we don't have that unspecified in any of the results that are returned to us. Similarly, if you wanted to ensure that unspecified was in it, you could use the $ and plus. And unfortunately, it was unable to find something in that range. Maybe if we change our score cutoff back to 0, so it returns anything, we probably will find something. And of course, and this kind of proves the point where, there's not a great match. And so the scores didn't come back that great, and why it might be useful to eliminate some noise by setting that score cutoff. Even in this case, if we set a score cutoff of 50, we would eliminate most of these undesirable results at the bottom here. So we do have a bunch of different operators. We have or, and, not. We have wildcards, fuzzy searches. We can weight different terms so that one term is more important than the other when it comes to returning results, and so on. Those are all in the manual. And if you are using this tool and you ever have questions about how to use them, you can always go to the TermWorks dropdown and click Help. And that's going to open up through your installation the document that you can use to find those operators. So all the search string operators are listed here. And it'll give examples of each one. And it's just kind of a way to, if you kind of can outsmart TermWorks, if you know more information, if you're having trouble spelling something and you need to use a fuzzy search, that's all available within the tool. So those are the basics of auto mapping and manual mapping. And again, I will pause and see if there's any questions. I'll check the chat, hopefully. Okay, got it. Or can you do a phrase? So the $ plus will include everything after the operator. So when we searched, and we entered $ plus, what that's saying is everything after this include, if you have a space, it's not going to carry on. It will just be that one word. So you'd have to use that multiple times. You mentioned kind of a phrase, and I added some local terms at the bottom as kind of an example here. So heart attack. You can always do something. So say heart attack, and this is just kind of a made up example, but it shows you kind of how you can really tweak your search results. You might want to find either a heart or a lung transplant code. So you can do heart and use parentheses to break this up. And or is used in the same fashion with the $. So we'll do heart or lung. And I'm just going to change it from attack to transplant. I know it's kind of not the best to match with that original term, but it'll prove our point. So our query is basically saying we want heart or lung, and we also want the word transplant, if I can spell it correctly. And so when I search, we get not only heart transplant related codes, we get lung transplant related codes, and that's exactly what we were searching for in that case. I'm going to go back and see if there's any more questions. How is the score calculated? That's a great question. So when, and this is all in the documentation as well, and it might be a little bit clearer there, but in the example of pulmonary tuberculosis unspecified with three terms within it, what it's going to do is it's going to search all three. And if it finds all three, it's like, great, that's probably 100% match. If it doesn't, it's probably going to search pulmonary tuberculosis, and then it's going to search pulmonary unspecified, and then it's going to search tuberculosis unspecified, and kind of break it down further from there until it finds matches. And it's going to rank them off of how closely those match. It's also important to note that things like intestinal infections, when it searches for infections, it's likely going to break it down into infection. So if it's not going to say, oh, we're finding a lot with infections or infection, but this is infections, it knows to cut that S and like ing and other prefixes and suffixes off to kind of break it down into a stem. And hopefully that answered your questions. I know the algorithm does calculate that result. So I don't know exactly how to break that down specifically, but it does break it down by searching all of them and then breaking it down from there until it finds a good match. Okay, I think I got all the questions so far. What I wanted to cover next, and search categories allows us to search only against a certain subset of the target terminology. So when we're looking at all of these codes, we see a lot of infections and parasitic diseases. And if you know ICD-10 well, you know that there is a whole branch for that. And we can limit our search results to that entire branch. So to create a category, again, through our main drop-down, manage search categories. Each search category is, of course, specific to the terminology that we're working with. And so I had created this category, but we'll create it again together. So infections. And all we need to do is specify that top parent code. So anything that's a descendant of the code that we're specifying in the category is allowed to be returned as a search result. So I know that it's A00 to B99 in the name, and I can go ahead and search. And I can add the concept, and that will add it into the category bucket above. And of course, you can add multiple. So if you wanted to add other trees with an ICD-10, you can do that here as well. And go ahead and save. So now we see ours in the list. We can always rename it. We can always edit it to go back and add more or remove concepts from the category. And now it's ready to use in search. So whenever you want to alter your search configuration through the main dropdown, configure search options, we'll select our new category and we'll apply it. And so now when I go ahead and search for all of these different infections and parasitic diseases, I'll just do a little chunk here. We'll search and we'll do autocomplete so it does the work for us, and we can take a look at the results it found. Again, at the bottom, we can see that we have 32 terms that we're searching against, the percentage. And most importantly, we can see that all of these codes are within the range that we've specified. It's not trying to return any codes outside of this range from the parent code that we specified. Just going to check can you edit category name? Absolutely, yes. When you go to the dropdown and manage search categories, again, you have to select the data source every time, but you can always rename it here. Oh, because yeah, I'm sure you saw that we had that typo there. And so now it's renamed. I think I'm caught up on questions. Got it. Okay, the next type of search breakdown is the search contained concept search. And each phrase or each word within the search is tokenized, and we'll see what that means in a second here. So I'll search this term. When I configure the search option, oh, sorry, I don't want to do that. I want to go ahead and search. Oh, I do want to configure the search option, sorry. And when you go ahead and search, if you decide, oh, you know what, I need to go back and configure, you can always go to the options button and that will bring up the screen. So here I'm going to say that I want to use the contained concept search and apply it. And I'll just do this manually for now and go ahead and search. And so the contained concept search, it's kind of doing what I said it does when it breaks down into different words. And so you can kind of use that as a way to pick the most important words when you're doing the search. So in this case, you know, gonococcal is probably very important. Genitourinary is pretty important. So I may want to limit my results based on that. And when you go ahead and create a match based off of that, you can see that it has highlighted in purple the tokens that were used to create that match. And you can always go ahead and change that as well. If you notice when we click, it does alter the results. It's a very helpful visual tool. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Abbreviations. So I mentioned at the beginning that when you're mapping, it's really helpful to make sure all of the abbreviations that are within your local data are expanded. And that will really help when searching because CHF, the TermWorks, it's not a clinician. It doesn't know what CHF is. The best it can do is guess. The good news is if in SNOMED or whatever target you're searching against, the synonym is listed as CHF, it can go ahead and pick that up. But that's not always the case. And so TermWorks comes with a number of built-in abbreviations, but it also allows you to specify your own abbreviations. So if you're working primarily in drugs and you're noticing, you know, tab is not expanding to tablet, you can always add those types of things in yourself. So what that does is when we use the drop-down or the right-click drop-down and use abbreviations, we can expand. And so it's saying, okay, CHF, it possibly could be congestive heart failure. And we can go ahead and we can change that. And it'll ask if you want to do that across the board. Sure. And it changes that within our data. Now, one thing that we stressed on our previous call we had was that you never want to change your starting data set. What we'd probably recommend is if you're going to edit data to make it more easily searchable, you probably want to add another column so that you can compare the original to the one that you've edited just for data consistency. And you always want to make sure you can marry back that change term to the original when you're doing the mapping. All right, I see a question. So it does handle, I don't know if everyone can see these questions, and hopefully they can on my screen. I know sometimes Zoom is a little funny about that. The question was, if you don't have the spelling 100% correct, will it match on an exact match only, or will it be able to kind of handle minor spelling errors? And it will handle minor spelling errors, as well as the use of the fuzzy search. So let me see if I can give a demonstration of that. So let's say I accidentally did strabismus. We'll go ahead and search. I still have the tokenized search on, 1 second. Okay, in this case, no. Okay. So in some cases it will pick it up, in others no. What you can do is use the, let's see, $F, which I believe is the fuzzy, and then it will pick up the incorrect spelling. But I have noticed several times that it does pick up on spelling errors. In this case, not so much. I think I'm caught up on questions. Is there a table of synonyms in the background was the second question. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest uses of this tool, is to make sure it goes ahead and searches against the synonyms that are provided in the data. So if we ever want to see what it is searching against, we can always take a look at one of the results and the details. And so each of these synonyms it's searching against, as well as the original name. Show mapping to SNOMED, sure. So Anil has had some interest in mapping to SNOMED, so we can also show what that would look like. I'm just going to hide our previous data, and we'll map the ICD-10 codes to SNOMED. So the first thing we need to do, we're mapping from a different column, we're mapping to a different target terminology. We want to configure those search options. So we'll map to SNOMED Canadian Edition. And we want to put the data in column R. And a lot of the times when you have a bunch of data in the spreadsheet, when you want to add more columns, sometimes it thinks there's data there. So you can either insert new columns to be safe, or you can ignore it if you know for sure there's nothing in those columns. And so I'll just pick the first few here, search and autocomplete. And sometimes when I'm sharing my screen, it gets a little taxed, so it might take a little bit longer than it normally would on your local machine. Okay, great. So we've got our search results for those 20 or so terms. Again, we see the same columns have been added. We have our code in column R and our name in column T. And I think what I just want to stress here is that, and I'm not sure if folks on the call here are doing any mapping, but without some kind of mapping tool, you're generally going and you're copying a term, you're pasting it in a browser, you're copying it from the browser, pasting it back in your spreadsheet. Using this tool will really expedite things, because a lot of the times you have a great match. You have typhoid fever to typhoid fever, you can't argue with it, and it's done the work for you. You can go ahead and approve it and save yourself that time in the end. And of course, there are going to be harder mappings, and those will require additional searching and going through the hierarchy and things like that, which the tool also provides some means to do so. But I think it's just important to realize that it can save a lot of time, especially picking off on those more perfect matches. So the tool itself, and sorry if I'm not reading these questions out loud. If someone can let me know if you can see the questions on my screen, that would be helpful. But the question is, can you map one local terminology to another terminology, neither preloaded in TermWorks? The answer to that is no, they would need to be preloaded in TermWorks, which is possible with the tools itself, but would require additional effort on InfoWay's part. So that would be a little trickier, but definitely doable. So Anil, that was the functionality I wanted to cover today. I'm wondering if we can unmute everyone. I'm assuming since people are asking through the chat that they are muted. If we can unmute people to see if they want to see anything else, have additional questions or use cases they want to discuss, I think that would be a useful way for time. I need to unmute all. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Okay, so if anyone would like to unmute themselves, please go ahead and ask any questions that you may have.
Just a quick question then. The first column there where you have color unspecified and it's obviously a mismatch. What would you then delete that and just do a manual search on that?
So you don't even need to delete it. You can just double click in here. Why it loves vaccine, I don't know. That might be something to look into. Let's see what the result was found by the BC group as well. So cholera disorder, which of course makes much more sense. Yep. Let me just look at my search options. Cutoff 0. So I know not everyone here was on the call, but looking through the list of terms that we're mapping to SNOMED, I can tell that they're all going to be disorders, some kind of infection. And so in that case, I would recommend narrowing it down to that findings and disorders hierarchy. That will make sure that things like cholera vaccines are not returned as the result. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know why that one doesn't want to come up, but that would be my suggestion in this case. Whenever you can use those search categories, if you know you're working in procedures, substances, products, disorders and findings, it's really, really helpful just to narrow down the search results ahead of time. The other thing you can do on the fly, and I don't think I covered this, so it's nice to show, is when you're searching, you can add an expression. And the expressions use the same search operators that we saw previously where you can make sure a term is included. So if I want to make sure that disorder is part of my result across the board, I can go ahead and add that to the search expression and go ahead and click search to autocomplete. And another kind of lesson learned from that session before is that things like unspecified, when you have two words and one of them is something like other or unspecified, it can really pull the results away from what we expect. So that's another option where you might decide to add a second column and remove the unspecifieds. As we know, SNOMED doesn't really use unspecified like the ICDs. So we can kind of see that once we added that disorder to the search expression, we were able to find the correct match right away. So again, just kind of tweaking the search to come back when you know a little bit more than TermWorks does.
I suppose you could use this sheet, save this sheet and use it when the next version of SNOMED CTCA edition comes out, if the original terms haven't changed, to add another column and then see if there are changes, right?
Right. I will talk about that a bit in the best practices section, but there are a few different ways you can approach that. Sometimes it's easier just to say, oh, SNOMED added 200 terms. It's actually easier to look at the terms they added and see if maybe they apply better to some of the terms in our local terminology instead of going that other way where you're going from, thousands to hundreds instead of hundreds to thousands. Something we can discuss together as a group, but it's always best to have a policy for maintaining your mappings. And since you mentioned maintenance, it's really important to note that you're really only reaching out to the server for the results. So if for some reason your computer gets thrown into a stream, the data's gone, unfortunately. But the good news is we will talk about TermManager next week, which is our web-based mapping tool, and everything is stored in a database for that. So it's a better method if you're really looking to maintain mappings in the long run. And it does have a few more options for migrating to newer versions of content and handling when concepts are inactivated that are that target for your code and so on.
A question, Alex over the health. Mapping to SNOMED, the output is in terms of fully specified names.
Yes.
But the search itself is covering also synonyms and the fully specified names, or just the latter?
No, yes, absolutely. It will cover not only the fully specified names, but all of these synonyms listed. So here's an example. It will search through all of these to see if it's a better match. Any other questions? Anyone have maybe something that they're working on that they might see if this works for them, might be interested in trying out?
And in the output, can you get also the parents of the concepts, or just the concept itself?
In the output, you just get the concept itself. You can, through the details, of course, see the parent, but we're not currently displaying any kind of parent in the output.
Yeah. And Jessica, this is Dish. So I'm just wondering, when we are using a SNOMED, so do we need to take care of SNOMED Canadian edition or SNOMED city, or the system will let us know, or how it's populated on the server side?
So Infoway takes care of, they host this server and they take care of all of the content updates. And so when they do get a new version, they will go ahead and make it available in TermWorks. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, you can always kind of verify that you're working in the version that you need to work in. When you configure your search options, you can go ahead and click that details tab and you can see, okay, great, I am working in 2020.09.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, and sorry I joined a little late. So
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, we did some mapping in the past, and Infoway asked whether we have to add additional columns with the French terms, the French counterparts. So in TermWorks, can you generate both simultaneously, the English and the French term?
Unfortunately, not in how we have it now. It's always going to spit out the fully specified name.
Any other questions? Hello?
Any other questions for me?
So this is Mukesh again. So Jessica, so when is your annual will be scheduling the next week sometime, or?
So next week, and Anil, feel free to cover it if you want. The next week's call, we are going to cover a TermManager tool, similar to how we did this today. And then the week after, we'll talk about best practices for mapping.
Okay, sounds good. So is this same Tuesdays or?
Yeah, Mukesh, it's the same same login details. So this is for 2 weeks at the moment, right? And you can don't need to re-register or anything like that. It will be the same. And I will post the link again on the Health Terminologies forum so that you're aware of it and what we hope to cover with TermManager. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Anil.
No problem. Okay, if we have no other questions, then I will close this session. Thank you, Jessica, for a really informative session. I thought I knew how to use this tool, but I'm learning more and more with this, especially the categories. I didn't think of constraining the categories when I do my searches. So that's definitely a great tip for me. I will make this video available on the Health Terminologies. So if you'd like to review it and have any additional questions, please feel forward to add them and make them available for everyone so that we can all have a great discussion about this TermWorks. Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.